Hey guys, Iamblichus Exhortation to Philosophy, chapter 15. In this chapter, essentially, Iamblichus presents Plato's cave. Well, not essentially, this is exactly what he does. Plato's cave allegory. And he says, he begins the chapter by saying, let us look at our natural condition with regards to education and ignorance. Because this is what this allegory illustrates. So let's have a look at that. And I'll be using my notes to give you more details. Okay, for those who do not know, there is an analogy of Plato's cave, and this is what it looks like. There is a cave, and in it we find several humans. These humans are chained, and they cannot leave the cave. They're chained to the ground, and their heads are bound, so they look in only one direction. Behind them is a fire, and behind them are some real things, some pots and so forth. The fire lights up those pots, those real things, and projects a shadow in front of those people. And what the people see is the shadow. They see the shadow and they think what they see is real, when in reality it's a shadow. It's an illusion coming from the real thing, which is behind them, which they are not even aware that exists, of those real things behind them. And so there is a bit of light coming from the top of this cave. Let me add it. This light is the light of the sun. The sun, in this analogy, is the intellect, or as can also be seen described as God, I guess. But these people, it's too far for them. They cannot see it yet. Their heads are bound. They're looking in one direction. So let's have a look. I've put some numbers, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That refers to the stages that Plato describes and also the stages that Iamblichus describes in this chapter. So let's have a look. First stage is the people are chained and bound. They only see the shadows. This is the stage of total ignorance, as Iamblichus calls it. As I understand it, these people are not even aware that there are other things that exist that are real, and that what they see now is just illusions and reflections of much more real things. They're not even aware that another world exists, filled with real things, which they can experience and see directly. They don't even have that idea. This is how I understand this stage. If you tell them that, they'll think this man is crazy. And we can already see in physical reality. Some of our friends might be like this. If we start talking to them about spiritual things, about possibly another world full of beings and so forth, they're going to think we're crazy. Why? Because of the chains. What are the chains? The chains, as I understand it, are conditioned ways of thinking, behaving. It's what I assume. This is why Iamblichus says it's our natural condition with regards to education in this physical life. We're not taught these things in school or university unless we go to a very specific, very narrow course. So we're not used to thinking like this. We're not taught spirituality or anything like this from childhood. We're taught other things, which, as I understand it, bind us with these chains to physical reality. Okay, so Iamblichus says, let's imagine chains get broken for whatever reason, and the person looks up and sees the opening of the cave, and this super bright light shining into this person. What will happen then? Okay, so most likely the person will get blinded by this light. It's an unusual light, it's really bright. Imagine you spend your life in a dark room, then suddenly you walk outside, you'll be blinded. What will you do? You'll return back to the dark room because in this blinding light you can't see anything. Nothing makes sense. So you'll naturally return to what you know and what you can see. This is how I understand this part. And we see this, my interpretation of this, we see this all the time. We see this with ourselves on the path of life of philosophy, and we see this with other friends of ours who might also be on this path. We see this in psychotherapy constantly as well, with other people. A person starts to take the right actions. Let's say we take an alcoholic. The chain for them is their habit of alcoholism. It binds their awareness, it makes them see and believe certain things about themselves, about others, and so forth. Let's say it has caused them so much suffering and pain that they break through it, and if they used to drink every week for several days, now they really get to grips with their willpower, and they are not drinking for 3 weeks, a month, for example, 2 months. What will be happening? If we observe them, we see this is what's happening. They start to have new ideas, new sensations, new emotions that before have been repressed by the alcohol. Suddenly it starts to arise, and things start to not make much sense to them. It is literally like becoming blinded by what is happening, because they encounter a part of themselves that they're not used to. It's a whole different part of themselves. And some of this part is pleasant, some of this part is very unpleasant. Anger spells and so forth. But instead of continuing in that direction, letting things settle, a lot of them give up. And they would rather return to a painful existence, which they know, than an unknown future possibility. So this is why a lot of people relapse, whatever the habit is, whatever the negative habit is. It could be overeating, it could be alcoholism, and so forth. And on the spiritual path, we see the same thing. We practice, we do our meditations and so forth intensively. And then a realization starts to emerge, an understanding, a shift in how we view reality. And what do we do next? We give up the practice completely. And we stop practicing for weeks or months and so forth. And we see this constantly. If we analyze our own behavior, maybe in some cases it does not apply, but in my case it definitely applies. And in the case of some of my friends who are with me on the path of philosophy, it also applies, from what I can see. What happens here, as I understand it, we start to get a glimpse of the light, which in this case would be a different understanding of reality. And it blinds us and we panic. So this will give us hope in terms of what happens next, this Plato's cave allegory. What happens next? Before we talk about what happens if the person continues to pursue the climbing out of the cave process, there's another scenario. Imagine somebody comes and drags this person out of the cave. What will happen then to this person? The person will become blinded again, and they will hate this other person who's dragging them out, and they will, given the chance, they will run away back into the cave. Again, we see this with spirituality so clearly, with spiritual practices and paths. If the teacher, the yogi that is training the student, if he forces too much onto the student will probably run away. And we see this constantly in ashrams and so forth. Maybe we've seen it in our friends, maybe we've done it ourselves. We've joined a serious practitioner path, and then soon enough, a year, maybe 2 years, we'll run away from it. And the ego will find any beautiful excuse to run away. The ego is fantastic at making excuses. It will find a great excuse to turn away. Blame whoever else but ourselves. Usually the ego blames the teacher. And we can see what's happening. It's scary. The world starts to change so fast that unless we believe and we hold truth, the belief that there is a light at the end of the tunnel, and this light will lead us to good. That only temporarily things are difficult. Only temporarily. Unless we hold this belief really powerfully, we will run away from this experience back to what we used to experience, however bad it is. We see this in psychology constantly, as I said, with alcoholics and other dependents. We see it with relationships. People return to relationships which are bad because they're afraid of what they experience when they're without a relationship, and so forth. So this is this part. When a blue person drags out, a blue person here is a much more evolved spiritual being, let's say, whether it's a physical being or non-physical. That's how I understand it. Okay, so let's say by continuous pursuit, the person climbs out of this cave of ignorance into the real world. Stage 4. First of all, how does he do this? Iamblichus says through habit. Through habit, this person will achieve this. And it makes sense. And Iamblichus says at first, the person will not be able to completely, to directly comprehend things and directly look at the sun. So the person will live at night and look at things through their reflections. For example, in the water and so forth. So the person will look at the sun through the reflections. And I'm not developed spiritually in terms of non-physical world, so I don't know exactly how this would map. But as I understand it, at this stage the person sees God in other non-physical beings, in ideas, in how to say it, in forms, and the person starts to see how everything is organized by according principles. And so he sees God and experiences God through ideas and forms, so to say. That's as close as I can kind of explain it. But this is, or maybe this is already the stage at which the person is experiencing things within wisdom. So wisdom is already directly experiencing things, processing them, and so forth. I don't know. Maybe somebody who is more experienced or who has realized this part can comment. That'd be very useful. If you could do that, please. Okay, stage 5. After that much habit and practice, the person can see the sun and observe the sun directly. So by the sun, I understand Plato, Iamblichus and Plato mean the intellect, or maybe that which is above the intellect. So to see the intellect directly, I don't know if that is enlightenment or gnosis or what the stage that refers to. Okay, so the person at this level realizes that the sun is the author of all things that exist. And that the sun's light illuminates and orders all things. So yeah, so some kind of realization takes place. I guess that the person sees the intellect and God, however you explain it, in everything at that level. The last part is the return. So Iamblichus says, imagine this person, having seen the real world, experienced it, can now compare this world to this world. Is so filled with, I guess, with ecstasy, beauty, and marvel, and awe, and energy, that they wish to return back to the underworld, to this world of ignorance, to help their friends, their loved ones, to climb back up and experience and live in this much, much happier real world that exists. And imagine this person does that. He returns into the cave. What will happen? Firstly, he will be blinded by the darkness. This is, I think, what that was mentioned. Yes. Then others, imagine others ask him, so you have spent all this time, I don't know, reading philosophy books and hiding in a cave, contemplating things, or even maybe not hiding in a cave, just being in the world, contemplating things, meditating, doing all these practices, strange practices and so forth. So what have you realized? And imagine this person will start to tell them that they can exist in another world while existing, while being alive. And that other world is so much more interesting and fascinating and real, and that everything is created by this other world and is a reflection of this other world. Imagine this person tells that to them. What will their reaction be? Some of them will think the person has gone crazy. They'll think, yeah, definitely, he's read too many books and he's gone crazy. He's talking all this mythical stuff. The others may feel angered by him, and if given the chance, Iamblichus says, they will try to kill him, because essentially he's telling them, look, your existence is a joke by comparison to how you can exist, and it's down to you. Of course, that could anger other people, and we see this in history. We see this over and over again. We see this with Socrates. We see this with Jesus. We see this with many spiritual beings who have returned and spoken of other world, whether we achieve this world after death or we achieve it while being alive, of the availability of another world that we can achieve through right, correct living and contemplations and beliefs. And those people were put to death by those who did not like those ideas, by those who felt threatened by those ideas. So this is the Plato's cave in like a small detail. Yeah, so let's do a mini meditation now. Let those ideas absorb. You can recite a prayer if you want, or just sit and meditate and relax. I'll do what I usually do, which is a prayer. And leave in the comments if you can add anything to this. Please leave in the comments, definitely, so we can all read and benefit from that also. Okay. Okay, thank you for your time, guys. I think this analogy is described also in Plato's The Republic, if I'm not mistaken, text. Thank you. You can click on the video now to keep watching this channel. All the best.